Welcome to BDO's Legal Tech Talk podcast. We're joined by judges and legal professionals to discuss emerging trends, regulatory updates, and the latest headlines. We'll provide tips to help your law firms and legal departments make the most out of legal technology.
Hi everyone, I'm Jared Crafton, BDO's Forensic Technology Practice Leader.
And I'm Daniel Gold, Forensics Principal and Leader of the eDiscovery Managed Services Practice.
Let's get started with this episode's exciting topic.
Welcome back to another episode of BDO's Legal Tech Talk. We are thrilled to have in the virtual recording studio with us Todd Atami from the law firm Covington Burlington. Todd is the Director of AI and eDiscovery. Todd, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm a big fan, so excited to talk to you today.
What's your favorite piece of technology at home right now?
That's a good question. So I've always loved hardware. I'm a hardware enthusiast. So anytime new products from NVIDIA come out, and of course, I'm talking all their consumer lines. So all their RTX series. AMD, I named my dog Ryzen.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
Ryzen. So everybody's like, well, that's a weird name. I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. Ryzen just came out, or AMD just came out with their new 9000 series Ryzen. So I just put the 9950X in my machines, building machines around that, but waiting for the new chipset to come out and the motherboards. And that's how big a nerd I am. And so new stuff will come out. I'll overclock it. I'll see how it does. I'll benchmark it, and then just put it up on my wall and then wait for the next stuff. But it does come in handy sometimes. Crunching through big data sets, and it's like really cool now that you can download the small llama model. You can run that on a 4090 and actually have an LLM at your house that Meta trained. It's kind of nuts when you think about it, but I love it. And I think that we're at a place right now where there's so much competition going on, and there's just VC money flying around everywhere. And I just can't get enough. I'm like, wow, this is great. I hope the competition continues as it has so we can do cool stuff like download an 8 billion parameter model from Meta. It's brand new. They just trained it, and I can run it here. So I think kind of the combination of, in the last 5 to 10 years, we've really seen hardware kind of wake up again, in the way GPUs are advancing with the RTX 30 series, especially for commodity GPUs. It got really better, a lot better all of a sudden. Everybody's like, this is making progress about the right time too, with all the AI stuff. But I don't know. My dream is that I get my hands on some of the big NVIDIA GPUs, but I think that's a little bit impractical. I can just go rent cloud compute like everybody else. But
I have a feeling it's going to happen then.
There is a sense of curiosity in you, Todd, though, that when you're talking about building one of those towers, those computers, this idea of let me just load it up, let me overclock it, let me see what it can do, and then iterate. And I think that goes beyond, it has to fundamentally, for you, go beyond just, I want to build a cool computer and see what it can do. I have to think there's a crossover into the world of the law.
I think that's right. And I think, the idea of tinkering or experimentation or, thinking about legal problems or e-discovery problems like a data scientist or like an enthusiast, it's a little different. There's a lot of these panels now on Gen AI and how's it going to work with document review or these different things. And, as lawyers, we have this very linear thinking. Will it do X? Is it ready for prime time I'll give it some requests for production and we'll hit play and then it'll spit out the answer like tar. And is it ready? Yes or no? And that's kind of wow, that's a really one-dimensional way of thinking about a software product. And it would be crazy if we kind of thought of deterministic coding or database technology in that same way, because there's this whole spectrum of things it can do. And I think about that way, man, it would be great if you had any level of LLM kind of in-house behind the firewall, whether that's at your vendor or at your law firm or whatever, to do a million different kind of in between that solve the whole document review problem with Gen AI or nothing, kind of QC. So you've done your TAR or you're reviewing documents for deposition, and you say to it, have I missed anything here? Could we create a RAG workflow to look at this set, look at everything else, and would you suggest I miss anything? And then read between the lines. Am I missing something here? Basically, it's kind of finding, how would a data scientist, how would somebody who's an enthusiast think about using these tools? And it's really the creativity.
Talk to me about the difference between, because you live both worlds. You're a computer scientist, right? And also a lawyer. How does a computer scientist think that is different from how a lawyer thinks?
In some ways, the practice of law has not changed since 1870. Yes, we have the internet and Westlaw and the sticky note. And those three things really improved the practice of law. But on some level, it's this noble profession where we're going to go sit in an office on our own and draft up something brilliant. And so I think lawyers are mostly looking at their tools in a more one-dimensional sense. Maybe they're thinking about discovery or the stops on discovery as some framework set out by the rules of procedure, and then we will review the documents. And really, I'm kind of constantly surprised in the industry as a whole, the amount of time that lawyers think, I need to dive into this software and this is going to help my life. Even if you take the most common lawyer program, Microsoft Word, how many people out there are using this with a full understanding of how styles work and templates and ability to create macros to check the 8 things they've always checked, or understanding Copilot or the variety of tools out there they could use as plugins to make sure all their definitions line up? Very few. And so it's kind of one is first a difference in mindset in terms of expecting new technology, expecting to learn new things, expecting it to change. And so the first difference in mindset is, we're flexible. We like new stuff. We think the software, there's always another version coming out. There's an update to the PEP, to the style guide. There's an update to the code itself. There's a new keyword. It's exciting to us. And we understand this process of learning new things. And I think lawyers aren't expecting that. They want to learn the tools and then learn their practice and get involved in the law and be better at the law and strategy and writing. And so I think that's your first difference. We're looking for new tools. We embrace them. We think it's cool. That's one piece. We want to learn new things. Lawyers generally don't. I think two, there's a way of thinking about workflows for the data itself that we see a document in a database as just a row in a spreadsheet. We see a piece of data sitting in a data warehouse as just that, one of many signals collected by Hadoop. And, there's these great tools, but, lawyers are kind of oh, this is like a document. And we're going to do something to the document, and kind of are still trying to put into this data framework the physical world of lawyering, of facts. And so, we'll look at a database and we'll go, oh, there's A, B, and C we can do to it. Let's move the data like this. Here's a nice Visio with a workflow. And I think lawyers are like, how do we get this document? Just show me what to read. I want to do my job. And so it's interesting when lawyers come to me in various contexts, whether this is casual or at the firm, in my role as kind of helping with e-discovery and AI solutions. I'll find that maybe half the time when I'm being approached to say, hey, is there an AI thing that can do this? I'll end up saying, oh, yeah, well, here is kind of good principles of workflow, classic data management stuff, kind of let's make the Visio, let's sit down together and map out the data flow and just make it visual and think about these things in units and in terms of validation and in terms of throughput, kind of like a data scientist would think, how are we going to get through this data? And that will be the answer. And they'll go away happy and they're like, this is great. And we never really engaged any sort of fancy, foundational model or anything, but just, of kind of applying the basics. They'll be so happy about it.
John, it sounds like the second point that you're making about the differences between how computer scientists like myself and attorneys like Daniel think, or, people who have combined skill sets like yourself, is really, thinking about data strategically and really being able to, understand the full picture of data and the impact of decisions you may make with that data. And also, it sounded like you're saying a lot of attorneys that you've seen are really missing the forest for the trees when they just get, so focused on some of the tactical aspects of working with data. Now, do you think that's something that we can help bridge the gap with education, or what strategies can we employ to help the attorneys that we work with to get that more global and strategic view of the data that they're working with?
There is some profound point and this is probably where I differ from a lot of other lawyers in this space, that there is a level of technical education and technical understanding that I think the baseline, we have to move it up. In some ways, I think we can retool as an industry and really try to understand better these tools. In some ways, it's about ready to change. I think it's really hard. Like, there is so much of a hype cloud out there with AI. And for people, I think your average lawyer is off-put by it. I think in a lot of ways, it's off-putting to me too. And I consume this stuff constantly. I'm drinking, the updates, because it's kind of like, there's so many voices out there. There's like your AI influencers love to talk about prompt engineering, just like, wow, okay, like interesting. There's the popular media portraying these things. And, we see like Character AI, second most visited AI tool in the world. Like, wow, Wall Street, where the valuations we see don't match the technology on both sides, but type 1 and type 2 errors. It's going up and down. Venture capital, again, it's great energy. We got developers, and then we have salespeople. And it's kind of like all those things, and you get this sense, I think, your average person, and I do, like, oh, something here is off-putting. It's almost like there's an in crowd with this new AI stuff, or it's like there's some exclusivity. And I'm just like, wow, that is kind of the opposite of my world, of what I've seen over the last, 30 years of being so into this stuff and building computers. And it's kind of like, no, inclusivity, education, getting people up to speed, making them feel comfortable with these tools, because they're the customer. They're the people who know the client. We need to create this technologically agile culture that's welcoming, that doesn't feel like there's some people in the know with like AI stuff and others that don't, but really stepping up the baseline. What do we expect these attorneys to know? I'm kind of like, wow, it needs to be so much higher than it is right now. And it's coming. There's this Churchill quote that I love that I heard last year. I can't remember which speaker was at Web Summit in Lisbon. And there's this Churchill quote, and it says, "You were given the choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, and you'll have war." Depending how big a history nerd you are, there's the Munich Agreement, which was, historians have some disagreement about what level of awful it was, but Hitler was over here, and let's do this Munich Agreement. It's going to stop this oncoming tide, and Churchill's like, no, you agreed not to fight him, and that was dishonorable, but you're still going to have this crazy. And of course, he was right, in the coming months, and it's kind of that way at the tech revolution and AI, and it's coming, and all the hype makes us kind of think like, oh, maybe not, but right now, let's say it doesn't advance at all. The ability of Gen AI today, September 2024 Gen AI technology to change the legal world, it's here. It's over. We can use these technologies. We can think of new creative ways to integrate it. Even if it only marginally increases in value, it's going to change the practice of law. You can ignore it, and you can pretend it's not going to be better at drafting a brief than you soon, but it's coming. And I think we have, on some level, despite the hype, grossly underestimated both how fast it will progress and its impact on the law.
There is so much, Todd, that I have to unpack with you. Wow. I think that was just so apropos. And I'm thinking of this epic Greek mythological war that's at play today. And you spoke with such eloquence, and yet some might say it's hyperbole that we are at such an inflection point.
Yeah.
But when you speak of this point that we're at right now, I have to ask you a couple of questions. The first one is, why is this any different than 14 years ago when we said, oh, technology assisted review is going to be the best thing? And there was this hype. It was in the Wall Street Journal, right? It was. Right. Tom Grix was there. He was the cover photo of the Wall Street Journal, had that great case in Virginia, right? Right after Judge Peck, who was on this podcast as well, said that, you could use technology assisted review, and everybody and the sales said, sign an NDA. We've got the best algorithm for technology assisted review. And then comes along a couple other technologies that said, oh, you don't even need a seed set. You just code one document and whammo, going. Right? You don't need to do anything, right? So one, why is this any different? And two, when you talk about this culture of inclusivity and you talk about this culture of bringing people in, I want to know, it's beautiful, but how do you do it? Yeah. So, counsel, I asked you a compound question.
These are good challenges. So number one, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I'm still having trouble convincing some people to use it. For me, I'm kind of like, that's a piece of the education. If they really understood what they were doing, they wouldn't. But why will the uptake be different? Why is this different than, the TAR or all the Web3 stuff? I think that the difference is, one, we have bridged some gap between the overall usefulness of the technology to the populace. Gen AI, everybody can use it. Everybody's kind of seeing like, oh, wow, it does things. We're seeing, younger people, ChatGPT is more popular than Google for searches with certain demographics. And we don't even have Search GPT yet, which they're promising here soon. So one, there's kind of this thrust to popularity or energy in the public at large. And now we've reached a point where I think that's going to get harder to deny. We're seeing RFPs from clients and potential clients, and I don't know, 80% of them are asking, how are you using Gen AI? Some of those are asking because they want to make sure it's safe. Others are asking because like, hey, we've heard of this thing. We're seeing it mentioned in all these companies. Will that hype die out and it, fizzles? Maybe. Guess that's a possibility. But I just think, one, the technology is groundbreaking enough and helpful enough that we're going to be able to ride the wave. Clients are going to demand it. And the technology itself lowers barriers to entry for the technology. The technology itself is so helpful for coding. It's so helpful for making new apps. And, we had this kind of emerging data landscape a couple of years ago. We're like, wow, there are a lot of collaboration platforms. There's a lot of cloud stuff popping up. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But now get ready, because everybody can develop. And it's so nice for me when I'm sitting there and I'm like, I remember how to do this in Java, and I can ask it and it'll tell me how to do it in 3 different languages. X thing, it'll translate it for me. I can give ChatGPT or, anything, any of these models, my code and say, what would you do to optimize this? And sometimes it has bad ideas. And other times I'm like, wow, I literally thought I was the smartest in the way I built this piece of code, and it has better ideas. And so I think the technology itself is lowering barriers to entry for companies. Smaller people, smaller shops can get in and build things. I think this momentum will kind of carry it forward and make it more undeniable and progress the technology.
What does the tipping point look like, though? I mean, are we going to reach, is it the first time somebody submits a brief and they get all the way through a successful result at a trial and they say, aha, guess what? That was all AI.
There's not case one where somebody reviewed their documents with Gen AI and then told the court, and the court went, okay, and we see popular platforms changing their suggested workflows to say like, oh, well, actually, could you review 10,000 documents with people first before you trust our Gen AI plugin? Yeah, I don't know when it tips or when it becomes acceptable. And a lot of that is this idea we talked about before, where it's kind of like, you have to have the prepackaged thing, yes or no, rather than the steps in between that are going to be really helpful. So when will the legal community actually adopt it? When will it really change the world? That's a tougher question. Certainly companies are demanding it. We see lots of very traditional law firms all of a sudden thinking it's a good idea to create AI-based positions. Um, I don't know. I think if I had to guess right now, in a year, if you're not using it in your big law firm and can explain really well how you use these tools responsibly, that's going to be a major downside for your RFP. That's going to hurt you. Companies are going to realize, okay, so I'm not getting as much value out of you. That's what I think. I think it's coming soon. When lawyers will have to learn this stuff better, I don't know.
It's interesting because there's a couple things that come to mind. Number one is, we've all heard the phrase the ostrich effect. And a lot of the CLEs I give, I talk about how the ostrich effect was actually a cognitive bias theory that was developed by two economists, had nothing at all to do with psychology, but it has delved into other areas such as, when we talk about technology. So cognitive bias is one, and also cognitive dissonance as well is something else as well that I think is very interesting. Leon Festinger is the one who created that theory. And I think that there is a lot of cognitive bias and dissonance inside of the legal world, because to your point before, we are practicing law like it's still the 1900s.
Yeah.
But yet here we are faced with all this technology. But there is this weird dichotomy that you have brought up, Todd. And that is, on the one hand, we're still practicing law like it's the 1900s, right?
Yeah.
And we still just want to look at a document, even though nothing is really a document anymore. There really isn't anything called a document. Text messages are not documents. I hate to break the news to everybody. Secondarily, right, on the other side, you just said it. A lot of law firms are creating roles with AI, and here you are the director of AI at the law firm.
Yeah.
So is it hype? Is it, I have to meet my clients where they are? And where they are is the fact that they want to see their law firm say they do something with AI. So whether or not we do or we don't, we're going to give somebody a title. Where do you see the entire landscape right now?
Yeah, I think the honest view is across the industry, the rubber has not met the road yet. You pull the associate out of any big law firm and they're not understanding how to use these tools, or are given the tools even in-house, from an InfoSec or acceptable use perspective. Like, they don't have them at their fingertips, and integrations into these platforms are not there. And it's one thing for people like myself, but that we really need it at scale. So what's the state of the industry? Yeah, it's like you just said, the ladder. Where people are trying. We have our in-house tools that we're rolling out to every associate, but still it's in its nascent stage, even at the firms, my friends at firms who are more progressive externally, the kind of the reality on the street to me, seeing this, of course, just my view, is that we're just getting started. There's nobody that has a culture of using this stuff to its maximum ability right now.
Can we talk a little bit about your role specifically as director of AI? I mean, I assume some of the things you just mentioned are on the roadmap, of course, but what's kind of your charge here in the first couple of years? What are you trying to accomplish?
So I think that my focus is noticing the hype elements of AI. And as much as those are helpful and people ask, well, what is Covington doing? We're doing the best stuff, of course. But it's really like, okay, how are we going to build a culture around this? How do we kind of ride this wave, this excitement of Gen AI, to build a tech agile culture? Because that's more important at the end of the day than integrating whatever is the shiniest new tool. Building a culture where, hey, a pilot, that's something that happens around here. There's pilot groups. We're used to it. We're used to a subset of lawyers trying things, and we've identified people at the firm who like it. And, there's, okay, so half the patent group actually knows C. Great. I bet you they'll try our tools and give us some interesting feedback, So it's things like that, is creating a culture that is expecting change, that is expecting, hey, there's this new thing, it's learning about tech, and you're going to need to dedicate some time to that. But really, let me tell you, it's going to make your life way better. And these tools are going to eliminate repetitive parts of your job, or parts of your job that aren't as fun, and let you focus your big legal brain on strategy and creative thinking. And they're going to give you ideation that might seem wild, but if you sit around and think about it, like it's very helpful. And so my kind of large scale focus is, okay, how are we going to deliver the most value to clients? It's creating this culture that is flexible, creating a culture that uses and deeply understands the tools, as opposed to kind of going like, all right, well, here are the 3 use cases for the current models on the market, which, by the way, will be radically different in 6 months. And this is what we're putting in place. Of course, we're developing our own in-house wrappers that can use the models in our own environment and those sorts of things. Yeah, we're doing all that. We're evaluating, we'll look at new tools all the time and try to get them in people's hands. But the real strategy, the real focus is creating that culture.
I'm very interested in the cultural aspect of this, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
you're describing a ton of change management, right? But it's
Yes.
that cultural point, which is, a very, very soft skill, right?
Yeah.
That's probably most important, right? That's really going to drive adoption. So I'm curious if you have, tips, techniques, how do you get through to attorneys, to really, get them thinking along a cultural line, like this is something that is just part of my day to day now.
I think it's a combination of, promising benefits. And so I think one, it's repeating your words over and over with everybody you talk to. And I think one-on-one or one in a small group, these are smart people. Lawyers, they're smart. They get it. There's a reason why they did these things. And so one-on-one, it's easier. And you can kind of convince them, yeah, do you kind of see how this is going to change things? And do you notice how our industry is slow to move? And so that kind of, proselytizing person to person, that's important. Those sorts of things. Okay, now can you focus on liaisons? Can you identify the people, your other missionaries, the other people that are going to engage in that kind of arm's length discussion? So sure, going to each individual practice group or unit within your business or your legal department, doing the presentation, but also in the presentation, hey, we have Sarah over here and Jess, and they are the liaisons. Go talk to them with your ideas. They want to chat. They have some office hours. It's open to talk about. We're lowering, like, you don't have to know about this stuff. You don't have to pretend like you know about it. If you want to talk to them about the absolute basics, great. Or if you have some pie in the sky, can computers do this idea, great. So creating more points of contact, more places for that kind of person-to-person discussion to happen. And of course, creating policies that are flexible, creating policies that fast track InfoSec approval, that fast track these things, or set clear standards out. And this is the ISO certification. This is what the scope of that ISO certification has to look like, So kind of deciding these things beforehand and creating processes that you can move it through. So there's this boring policy side that you got to get your policy index out and highlight everything and go through and sit down and make sure the stakeholders are on board with you. Make sure you have the staff to do that, to move faster. You're going to have to hire a couple people, probably big institutions. But that piece, and then this proselytizing idea of getting the ideas out there, providing the trainings, on-demand trainings, in-person trainings, office hours, and the liaisons.
Legal teams are struggling to manage resources, maintain compliance, and adopt new technologies. BDO's legal operations team can help. We enhance efficiency, reduce costs, and support compliance so you can run your legal department like a business. Schedule a meeting with us today at BDO.com.
What are the small wins that I think everybody listening to this podcast is going to appreciate to learn from you? How have you been able to find new followers from small wins?
I think that the magic happens with technology, and this is AI or creating a simple macro to help a paralegal stamp exhibits. The magic happens when there is ownership in the process. People feel like they had an idea and helped. And so I can kind of trace a lineage of people at our firm who are very tuned in to this idea that like software can help me. Or, I bet you if I go and talk to Itami or some of the other folks at the firm, they'll have an idea to do this. And so small wins are seeing things like that happen. The paralegal example is one where on a patent case, stumbled across the paralegals. I love to talk to the people who are actually doing the repetitive work because they have the best ideas of how to innovate. Hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, you're stamping these exhibits. Okay, so there's a giant folder full of 20,000 documents. You're fishing out an exhibit for trial. You're renaming it. You're putting a PDF stamp and you're naming the stamp. And I'm like, yeah, I think with a little DOS and like 10 lines of JavaScript within Adobe, so using all of our own tools, we can create an automated workflow where you click, it'll add the stamp, it'll rename the stamp, it'll rename the file, it'll scrub it, and it'll put it in a folder for it. And we changed literally kind of a 300-hour process into 3 hours. So that was a win for the client to the tune of, 297 hours. So they liked it. I liked it. I liked the money savings. But the paralegals are like, wow, this was great. That we don't like stamping exhibits. And then those people took that, they put it in our trial manual, and they're thinking about it in more expansive and creative ways and have subsequently asked me about other kind of some intractable problems that are really fun to solve. That I'm like, just seeing those wins, seeing people get happy and the light bulb clicking on, and then all of a sudden they're thinking about it creatively. They're thinking about it in a totally different light, kind of endless possibilities, as opposed to, I know this software does A, B, and C.
I love those examples of small wins and, getting that excitement in people and getting them to that point where they're just running with the ideas is fantastic. But there is another side to it as well, right? I mean, AI, has some risks. And earlier you mentioned, a lot of policy building that you're doing. So I'm kind of curious how you're thinking of, and it's probably still early, I'm guessing, but how are you thinking of, embedding, some of the ethical thinking? How do you get them to think through like, oh, there might be some bias here actually, or, maybe I actually shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, 100%. Or like, hey, have we created some crazy antitrust risk with this company that's coming and presenting their product like it's a moat, but it's actually not? I think that it's seeing this AI technology and tomorrow's AI technology as producing some sort of new, novel risk that's outside of existing information governance frameworks. That's a mistake. No. Remember all the bad ways you could use your computer to violate the rules of ethics last year? They're still there. Okay, whatever you could do with that Google and that email to make bad stuff happen or disclose client information or get wrong ideas from the Google or from the Westlaw search, those are still there. It just, that Gen AI tool is no different. And kind of, saying like, it's going exactly back to the culture. We have a framework for evaluating information security and thinking about confidentiality. And I've had clients who copy and pasting words into an online translator and being like, wow, so, okay, don't do that anymore. Like that's, that's not a good practice. And, just kind of getting people thinking, oh, whoa, hold on. Like, here's our acceptable use policy. This is the proper way to handle data. These tools are no different. Is this approved? Can you put confidential information in here? Yes or no? It's the same everywhere. If it's in Google, if it's in some website, and it's, again, getting people used to operating within this framework and understanding the risks associated with it. And so what are the limitations of the tool? Would you go into Westlaw or Lexis, type in some natural language search 2 years ago and think it showed you all the cases? Would you pull up one secondary source and think it's showing you all the cases on X? There's a name for that. It's malpractice. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how to practice law. That's not how to operate in our common law system. You got to dig. You got to look for citation. Who's citing this? And it's always been this way. But at bottom, it's that, hey, there's a way to use these technologies. There's a responsible way. This has a certain level of confidence associated with it. Some technologies, we need to validate that output. How do we do that? How do we validate Westlaw's output? Again, thinking like a data scientist. When it tells us all the cases, do we trust that? Absolutely not. These are the steps you build. It's 80-20 rule. It's going to take you a whole bunch of time to build confidence in the results you got initially. And so it's just teaching that culture evaluating these tools just like you would anything else, but showing them these parallels, teaching the methodology as opposed to this is some new thing and it's going to hallucinate. Like, yeah, no kidding. But we need to build that, show them that within an information governance framework, within an InfoSec framework, in a way that we're teaching methods rather than shiny new tool.
It's so interesting. I didn't even have to ask you the question, Todd, because you really honed in on something very valuable for all of our listeners, which is the how. How do you have lawyers understand the very delicate balance between becoming a data scientist, a computer scientist, and practicing law? And there is a very distinct, bright line of understanding. And I think you really talk through a lot of that. And it's, Jared zeroed in on it before as well. This language that you use about being able to build out this culture, I think it is really remarkable. And I think it makes you stand out, Todd, from a lot of other folks in this industry who are trying to do the same thing as you. That culture of inclusivity and how you are preaching and how you are building, followers, I think is pretty remarkable, which makes me want to ask you what I hope to be a very thoughtful question for you, which is, when you look back on your career so far and you think about what's to come for you, Todd, what is the legacy that you hope to leave?
Yeah, that's interesting. What is the legacy? I guess it is a legacy of adopting these attitudes toward the technology, sharing the excitement is really, I guess, what gets me off the most. Having people see how cool this stuff is. There's something kind of so special about it and so personal about, these new technologies, that it's there for everybody. It's equal opportunity in so many ways. And the culture of tech as a whole, we have seen these technologies released in a largely open source manner. And, CUDA is sitting right there. Anybody can use it, and it's actually amazing. Anybody can use PyTorch. You could learn it in 2 hours and be building your own models. And that sort of accessibility and that sort of, you don't need a special card to play. I loved it. I love tech. And so the more I can kind of turn people onto this, or the more people that really kind of step back and see, wow, the big picture, like, this is exciting. This is fun stuff. I want to be a nerd too. To the extent that I could turn people on to this kind of nerdery, and this just, it's, silly and fun, and there's always something new. Like, the more people who kind of get in my boat for at least a second or to some degree, I love that. The more the better.
Well, Todd, your enthusiasm is infectious. Your passion is contagious. And unfortunately, we're out of time. But thank you so much for coming on today. This conversation's been an absolute blast.
No, thank you. I had a great time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on BDO's Legal Tech Talk podcast.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe for more episodes.
Head over to BDO.com for a list of all of our episodes, transcripts, resources, and how to get in touch with us to continue the conversation.
Until next time, this has been another episode of BDO's Legal Tech Talk.